Benefit of learning music theory. In prior presentations, we discussed 4 different areas that many guitar instructors start off with and many learners start off with when learning to play the guitar, suggesting that we should think of them as 4 different areas and learn them all kind of at the same time and separately, but imagining that in the future they're going to combine together, kind of like 4 roads that are going to lead to the same area, including learning basic chords and that will be helpful for memorizing songs, learning basic scales like the pentatonic scale, learning power chords, and now we're thinking about learning basic music theory. So basic music theory is what we are on at this point in time. So notice when you're thinking about basic music theory, we kind of map this thing out. You can kind of put it on a piece of paper and think about music theory, but oftentimes people will apply music theory to a piano, the instrument of choice to kind of demonstrate music theory is typically the piano, because the piano is laid out in a very structured way, and it's going to be helpful then to kind of map out the patterns of music theory on the piano. With the guitar, we had the added step of needing to look at the fretboard and understand how the fretboard is laid out. Once we understand the fretboard, then we can apply the music theory then to the fretboard. So some instructors, you can take a look at the music theory, start with the piano. If you have background with the piano, they kind of apply it there, and then they're going to convert it to the guitar, and some might just go directly to the guitar, but of course the end goal here is to apply that music theory to the fretboard. Now there's 2 kind of reasons to learn music theory. One is it's going to be very practical to some degree, and the other is just kind of interesting to learn the music theory. So from a practical standpoint, which is probably what we want to do kind of starting off when we're getting the mechanics of how we're going to be working with the guitar, we're probably looking for then, how can I do this? How can I make a song? How can I make this work? How can I play something that sounds good with this other thing? And that's the music theory is going to help with the building of chords, chord progressions, songs, soloing, all very practical kind of components for just playing something that would sound good. It's also just interesting. It's fun to continually ask like why. You're going to be asking like, why does this work, or why does this get put together in that way? Why doesn't this work? And the answer to those, you can think of them theoretically in terms of music theory, and that can be kind of interesting just in and of itself. So what to learn when you're kind of starting off on the music theory? You probably want to learn the kind of the practical side of things when you're starting off, because you want something that can actually lead, to playing playing some stuff. So you want to know, of course, the musical alphabet. So you want to know, what's going to be included in the musical alphabet, and then the major scale construction, the minor scale construction, the major chord construction, minor chord construction, major chord progressions to build songs, and then the minor chord progressions to build songs are probably some of the core kind of starting points that you can want to understand just theoretically in terms of music theory. And then when you start to play things, you'll kind of apply that information into what you're playing and some of the chords that you're putting together and the pentatonic scales that you're going to be putting together. So for example, when we're thinking about some of the other items in terms of learning the chords in the open position, learning the pentatonic scale, and then learning the major scale just on positions in the guitar. Say here's the fretboard, this is the nut over here, this is the big E string, this is the little E string on the bottom, this is fret 1, 2, 3, and so forth. We talked about in prior presentations learning the pentatonic position, which would be all the dark blue, and this would be position 1. The dark green would be the other positions in the pentatonic. And then if you learn basically this position, then we talked about basically the fact that you can have the open positions like a G shape, a C shape in the open positions here, and those can be moved around using the caged system. And you'll talk about that. You'll probably see that or learn that later, which means you could move around those open position chords. And then we talked about the fact that, later on when you think about this theoretically, you're going to start to say, well, that pattern fits in this pattern, right? So now this G shape is now a C chord when we moved it up here, and we talked about this in the prior presentation, so I won't go over it in a lot of detail. But you can see how they kind of overlap on each other just in terms of a shape type of pattern. And then we can see that the light blue are actually all the added items to the pentatonic scale, which are now the full musical alphabet, meaning you can now count out, you can actually play this and say the alphabet. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. This is how your fingers would play it. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You'd simply play it in order in that way. So you can see it from a pattern, just a pattern standpoint, how all the patterns kind of fit together. And then from a theoretical standpoint, you might get into more theory. You might start to say, okay, well, the musical alphabet is seven notes here, and the pentatonic scale means 5. So you can start to see, so that means, these are the 5 notes of the 7 that I'm basically playing in the pentatonic scale, which means you're not playing every note, which gives you a little more dissonance, a little more variance between some of the notes, which is why it kind of sounds good. It's not they're all not as close to each other. You're skipping some of the notes, and then you might say, well, then I can put this chord shape kind of on top of it. This basically G shape fits on top of position 1 of the pentatonic scale, and you might say, well, that means, and that chord is a major chord, which is consisting of 3 notes, right? It's only 3 notes, although some of them repeat: C, E, and G. C, A, and G are a major chord that, in a major chord, only has 3 notes, and that fits inside of the pentatonic scale, which has 5 notes. So if you're playing something, in C, then you might see this whole position, but then start playing around with these 3 notes if you're starting to pick around on something that's playing over a C chord. And even though you're in the pentatonic position, you may not play as much, or at least you may start and end on something that's in the actual C chord, right? A C, an E, or a G, or in that position, even and it lies in the pentatonic scale. So the theory kind of helps you to start breaking that kind of thinking out. So there's a whole lot of courses on theory. You can find them forever, but there's a couple here that are pretty good. I've put some links to a couple of these theory courses that I thought were pretty good. And this one has a full music theory from this guy who's kind of interesting. He's kind of a funny guy to watch. So I enjoyed his music theory courses. So I think they're worth taking a look at here.